the Wellbeing show. Sorry, you caught us because my producer told me to shut up because I was in a really interesting conversation about gaming, which we'll continue. But he said, "Shut up, we're just about to start the show." So there you caught me mid-sentence. Anyway, this is the Wellbeing show. If you're listening to this on the 2nd of March, in the UK time, it's 9 p.m, but it's 10 p.m. where John, my guest, is because he's over in France and wherever your time is. It's live. It'd be lovely if you joined us. It's a live podcast. I like that experience. Be great to hear from you. My number's +44 750 319 745. So drop me a WhatsApp or even call if you like, and I'll make you famous. There you go. And if you're listening to it another time, though, it's not live, and don't call me because you might wake me up. Sort of, you might get a grumpy me going, "What do you want?" Which is never a particularly nice experience, but there you go. Anyway, that's enough of that. John, great to have you back. John from the world famous John Wilson from this incarnation. I'm going to say Onlinevents. I know you do other things as well, but is Onlinevents okay to tag you as, or do you want to sort of claim all the other stuff that you do?
Yes, I think Onlinevents is the place that we met, isn't it? And yeah, we've had some fun adventures, both here. The conversations on your show. You've been on Onlinevents doing stuff with us. I'm also director at Temenos Education. We run a psychotherapy training program, amongst other trainings, and I'm also in private practice as a psychotherapist, a supervisor. I do a bit of coaching, and so.
Right. Yeah. There you go. And same with the online thing, because that's sort of the sort of title of the show is virtual training for wellbeing practitioners, and that's what you offer mostly, is training that is virtual in the virtual online space, but is also about how to be in that space as a therapist. So it's you deliver it in the medium, but also explore the medium and the therapeutic potential and the relationships that exist in that medium. Of course, one of the great things about the online space is that you get to carry this amazing office that you apparently are in wherever you go in the world, which is amazing. This sort of IKEA office that you have in the background, which we should all sort of know is completely fictional, as is John. Actually, John is no longer real. He is only in the online space. That's not true. I've met you in real life. But that's one of the great things. But that's how we met, wasn't it? Originally, was at that point you got me come up to Scotland, I think, and you filmed me doing one of my over-the-top talks about something, and you put that into as an online sort of CPD piece of training. Where's the company now? I guess it moved away from filming those types of events to creating them mainly online or virtually. Is that the direction of travel that you've gone now?
Yeah, I guess it is. Especially over COVID, everything in the world moved online. So we haven't done anything in a physical space for, you could count it on years now. So yeah, we do all of our work on Zoom. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's interesting, I think, that we used to have conversations. This is pre-pandemic conversations, and I've tagged this as, training, looking at post-pandemic training now, because pre-pandemic, and I think you might agree with this, certainly the conversations you and I used to have was we were still in our profession stuck in conversations about the whole online experience and what it meant. And I remember going to a conference once. This wasn't one of yours. It was something up some sort of coaching or entrepreneurs conference somewhere, and there was a guy who is representing himself as a psychotherapist, and he was absolutely furious about online CBT and stuff. I mean, he was literally spitting feathers, the guy, and I remember thinking, he was going, why would people want to do online? I was thinking, well, if they're going to make you somebody as angry as you, I think a computer might be nice, sort of, rather than sort of your stuff being dumped on them. But that to one side, he was really furious. And there was a sort of a huge raging debate. My experience in the pandemic was that that debate is over and done with. And it's just nobody in the profession can argue anymore that online therapy doesn't work, or neither can patients. And I remember literally within a space of a week, for example, a sort of a very highly regarded EMDR practitioner, sort of 1 week before the pandemic, absolutely adamant that you had to be in the physical world with somebody to do EMDR. 3 weeks into the pandemic and the lockdown, oh no, it's fine, you can do it online. Like, yeah, okay, right, there you go. Sort of, because when faced with that existential crisis of the ending of the profession, which is what it represented, people adapted.
Absolutely. It's been a massive shift in the profession. I've been working online as a therapist since 2006-07. And part of kind of small communities of colleagues are thinking, it's going to break through soon. Maybe this is the year that it's going to break through. No.
Conversations we were having, that's right.
Absolutely. No, it's not this year. Oh, maybe this year, next year. And then, of course, the pandemic just changed that overnight. I mean, literally overnight, wasn't it? As you say, in that such a short space of time, the whole profession was working online.
Yeah, and people who dug their heels in just saw, well, I mean, they saw the end of their careers if they didn't undig those heels. And fair play to them. I'm not sort of pointing fingers saying, yeah. I think that actually what happened was that they went, oh, I was wrong. I don't think anybody can say I was wrong and change. That's an admirable thing. I wouldn't sort of ever sort of point anything at anybody and say, I told you so. It wasn't like that. It was, I think genuinely people had these strong held feelings that it wasn't as good a service. But that's over, that's done with. And I remember I've heard you and James talking before, and James was saying, well, Noel stayed online, and I have. I mean, 90% of my work was online. The 10% that was left was vectored on during the pandemic, but nothing. I have no intention, apart from where it's appropriate, of going back to if you like, real world. I mean, I think online spaces are real, and we need to talk about that. Maybe I'm sure sort of our language isn't working for me. How would you describe it rather than real world? What would you physical world?
Yeah, I would. Like in the same physical space, physically present to each other. In terms of I've had my practice completely online since 2017. Yeah. So I was kind of in that working space. But with our students, we're talking about, we're back in the room, back in a physical space. Because some of the language was working face-to-face with someone, but that was before we were doing lots of video conferencing, which is still relatively new because of the technology. But of course, we're face-to-face right now, so that language doesn't work either anymore. So
absolutely. And I think mine and yours relationship as professionals and friends, and I mean, I think of us as friends as well because we have that personal relationship. But I think to me is an example of the way we are more now, which is that over the years, the online space has facilitated us having a relationship and maintaining a relationship, which otherwise may not have grown at all, to be honest, because certainly our lives as individuals have moved radically. We both of us have moved cities and countries and things like that, and yet we've been able to maintain a personal and professional relationship, which has allowed the relationship to be continuous. So
absolutely, yeah. Well, and I think this is the thing about, although it has been and maybe still is debated in the therapeutic world, lots of people live like this, where you're chatting, might be chatting on WhatsApp, then we have a Zoom call, and then we meet for dinner, and then we're back on WhatsApp. The majority of people, certainly in countries like the UK, like France, are already living like that. And
and also I think even in countries that don't have the same infrastructure, they're still using these types of technologies, and actually these types of technologies are improving their lives. So, for example, banking through mobile phones. And the use of sending money through text messages and stuff like that has replaced the need for an infrastructure that's never going to happen in some countries.
Well, absolutely. We were in Cambodia.
A bunch of banks built in the outback in Somalia. It's not going to happen. So banking had to adapt to the sort of situation. If people wanted access to banking and they need it. And so it evolved into sending text messages to transfer money. And
well, that's right. I mean, we were in Cambodia the year before the pandemic, and the mobile phone speeds in that country in some places were way outstripping the speeds you get in the UK. So, as you say, the infrastructure has just landed there as opposed to being upgraded as it is in countries like the UK, where there's been a lot of infrastructure. So I think that also opens up lots of opportunities for education, for well-being services in countries that have got huge amounts of population that are coming into what might be described as a kind of middle income, middle kind of class lifestyle. So I think we're not really in touch with that in kind of Northern Europe, but there's a huge amount of changes going on in some parts of the world.
Yeah. So give us a brief history for people who may not know about online events, its missions, and it's what it tries to do, and Temenos as well. I think it sort of brings us into that, the sort of history of that, so people have some idea of where you come from, and then some sense of where you are now. So over to you. I mean, how did all of this kick off, as it were?
A little wander down memory lane, Noel. That's nice for two old friends on Zoom.
But one day I was cleaning windows. That's literally true of John. Actually.
That's exactly right. Yes. I mean, since I left school, I've been running a cleaning business and working in the cleaning business. So running and managing, and I trained as a therapist 2005 I finished my training 2005 to bring a different kind of work into my life. And then my sister and I started Online Events in 2009, mostly because I was part of a community of counsellors who are working online, and we wanted to run a conference about working online. We thought, well, this conference should be available online, but in 2009, to live stream a conference, you'd almost have to hire the BBC.
It was like, where's my local outside broadcast unit?
Exactly, that's what it was like. And I mean, here we are tonight. We've got James looking after us, I guess, but it's a kind of, by comparison, massively.
He's snoring away. That's why he's got a microphone on.
Okay. Well, we managed to, I wrote my dad in. He had a decent camera. I bought a new laptop, and Sandra's a genius with customer service. And the three of us managed to get that conference on a website, live streamed. And we thought, there's definitely a business here. So we've done, like the conferences we did with you, we'd hire a room and we'd have some audience in the room, we'd have some audience online. We've done lots of events like this where everybody's online. It's been mostly a niche experience though, for about a decade, and then it really blew up over the pandemic. I think in the last couple of years, 18 months, 2 years, we've had something like 30,000 people, different people on our events. So it's just that's been massive for us to kind of work with so many people. We now run something between 10 and 20 events a week, learning events for people in the helping professions. And we're just out of a 2-day conference, an international conference on coaching supervision. So we had about 100 colleagues, and we had translation in Chinese and Romanian and in Russian as well, and colleagues coming in from all over the world. So that we just couldn't have imagined that kind of infrastructure in 2009 could be possible.
Yeah, I mean, it was, if I cast my mind back, I just remember the model we had then for events was that we were going to film and place on a website a physical world event and try and capture the physical world event. And we are miles and worlds and away from that now. And it would never occur to me these days that to do an online event, what I need to do is find a room and find all the kit and tech to be able to film that room. And particularly the sound is always a problem, as you know. The bit of sound is always a problem in physical spaces. But it would never occur to me that that's what I would want to do anymore, because there are so many things that you can do in the online space. And sort of literally, you know, what we're doing this evening, which is we're streaming live on several platforms at the same time. That was, you know, just not available before, but now we can do that with the flick of a switch. And it's really, really simple and straightforward, and the software is there, and now the conferencing software as well is really interesting and really good fun to work with. Have you moved into those types of sort of breakout spaces and things like that? Is that where you are now, or is it sticking with the Zoom?
Yeah, well, we kind of live in Zoom. It's just such a great platform. There was lots of debate about it towards the beginning of the pandemic. But yeah, like in that conference today, we've been in and out of breakout rooms. As we were saying, we've got the interpreting functions going on. It's really everything that you'd be doing in a physical space, you can do in Zoom, except you're in the comfort of your own home. You know? So it's hard to beat that, really. You know?
Yeah. Absolutely. Before the show, we were talking, I'm going to move the conversation on a little bit into just thinking about these issues about how we are as human beings with the spaces. Now, I'm 55. I'm literally turned 55 the other day, in fact.
Happy birthday, Noel.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, you actually sent me a message. You remembered somehow. Well done, you. Is that Facebook reminded you or something?
Yeah. The secrets of technology.
Yeah, I remember my own birthdays because Facebook tells me. That's it. I wouldn't know otherwise. Particularly my age, everything's beginning to not work as well. But I guess the point I'm making is that I literally remember the first personal computers on the ZX Spectrum, etc., which sort of lets you my age. Kids have no idea what I'm talking about, but I remember you used to be able to program in a little calculation to work out the square or the surface area of a window, and it would take 20 minutes to program it in, and now here we are, and my identity as a human being is very, very, very much about it was formed in one world and has had to adapt to the world that we're in now. And so I'm comfortable in these spaces, but it's not an early part of my growth and development. And I was talking to you before the show started, watching my boy navigate between online and non-online, offline worlds. Let's just say that. Online and offline worlds, and watching his relationship to those things. He's 11, he's grown up with this stuff. It's very much part of who he is. He has this fluid, graceful, almost balletic relationship to these realities, and I'm quite clunky with them. I use them thoughtfully, I embrace them. I think I'm an early adopter of many things, but it isn't natural. And with him, it's natural and flowing. And I was sort of watching him sort of as he's playing with his I'm going to mention the names of these things because people know them, Nintendo Switch. And so it was really interesting watching him and his mates, and his mate stayed with me for the week. I was the main parent for these two boys, and they both had their switches with their headphones and things like this, and they were talking to friends online and to each other in the room, and there were mates from school, and there was this boy's sister who happened to be staying in a chalet, who would join in every now and then. And it was amazing to watch this sort of incredible event where, they're playing this game where, I don't know, they're shooting each other or something, or shooting somebody, I don't know, somebody was shooting somebody, or somebody was getting killed, I don't know, in a sort of really ridiculous cartoonish way. And yet there was this really comfortable blend of online and offline experience. And very much for him, it's very much part of who he is. It's how he can talk to his friends and did you try this, and Roblox this, and Nintendo this, and various things. I sort of like, I show interest because I'm supposed to, but I'm like, it goes beyond me. And he's fluid and dynamic, he's embracing it. And the two worlds aren't separate. They're very much in complement to each other. And I really love watching it. I mean, I find it amazing. As a clinician, I find it amazing. This absolute integration of these experiences, and watching the way we are and the way we are going to be as a species. And it's lovely and it's embracing. I've been writing about it this week in terms of, the scare stories around gaming addiction. They are scare stories. It doesn't exist as a problem, really. Some kids have disorders around gaming. Okay, but it's a small number, and mostly it's not a problem. It's actually a very pro-social, healthy activity on the whole. And it feels to me a bit like that in terms of our profession, that we're sort of having to clunkily adapt and try and embrace and understand this thing, because part of what we have to do, I guess, as therapists is to experience and think about these issues quite deeply. And think about our own process within that.
Yes. Well, as humans, we're just all about the relationship.
Yeah.
And I think that's what it can be easy. I guess therapies happen for hundreds or so years in a room, either facing each other, or I guess to begin with, facing away from the therapist, and like that's where the relationship happens. But humans are just desperate to be connected, desperate to be in relationship, and it's the kind of complete revolution of the internet that we can be connected even when the person we want to be connected to is not in the same physical location, and that is just incredible for us as humans.
Yeah. In terms of the training that you're doing at the moment, the sort of virtual experiences and the virtual training that you're offering, where would you say it's at in terms of how much of it is about, literally train people on how to use this stuff, how to experience it, how to analyze it, and how to understand it, and how much is a curriculum that any therapist might follow, just delivered in a virtual setting? I mean, where is that sort of balance, and what seems to be sort of people needing at the moment? What are they sort of asking for? What are you delivering?
Great question, Noel. At the beginning of the pandemic, when just thousands and thousands of colleagues were coming into Zoom, many for the first time, it was a lot about the technology. How can I get in here? How can I do that safely? And of course, that's really changed. We run conferences, and we're still saying to presenters and to colleagues, look, if you need a bit of help to be in here and to kind of manage. And, everybody's on Zoom, has been on a lot of Zoom calls, or if it's not Zoom, it'll be something like Teams or something like that. So it's just, that's normal life for such a lot of people. It's like the community of colleagues who've been working online for more than 2 decades now, which is kind of not really well known. There's also a lot of experience and learning in there that maybe hasn't trickled all the way out yet to the main profession. So it's been wonderful that colleagues can jump on things like Zoom and work with clients. And there's some nuances to that that's really worth knowing. And that kind of training, I think there's still some penetration to do into the mainstream around some of those nuances, I think.
And for you, I mean, this is sort of maybe difficult for you to sort of step outside of the fact that it's a very much a part of who you are. But in terms of being able to be within the virtual space as a clinician and operate within that, what's your experience in terms of thinking about the relationship with clients and the types of ways that you're approaching things and looking at issues and handling and holding? And we use these offline terms, holding and handling, and which are very much about some of the early theories of child development, where you would pick somebody up and physically, emotionally contain and hold them. Sort of where are you at in terms of a sort of an online practitioner, and how are you offering that training to sort of wellbeing practitioners in terms of them understanding these dynamics and how they translate to the virtual world?
Well, I think that varies a lot between practitioners and how they work, how they are as people as well. So for me as a male therapist, I have never been a very touchy-feely kind of therapist, because that's always going to be tricky. You know, as a white male therapist, how is that going to be interpreted? So I would use my voice a lot in the room with clients, how I hold my body, how I hold my head, the tone of voice, the volume of the voice. So all that was around for me working in the room. And that is very much the case online as well. Like, I'm very much really watching the client. I can up-regulate, I can down-regulate, we can pause, or we can get into something difficult. And a lot of that is about how I'm using that kind of upper half of my body, how I'm using my voice as well. But other colleagues, I think the colleagues who have struggled the most are the ones that are doing a lot of body work in the room. And I think that is the hardest to translate. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but and I think that's a bit of a continuum. I don't think most colleagues are not either or, and so they've been able to adapt some of what they're doing in the room to working on.
I wasn't so much thinking about that. I mean, I think because I work with colleagues who are much more kinetic, and they have to have consulting rooms. So if they're putting hands on some of the physiotherapists, etc., but there's no alternative to it. And actually, even during the pandemic, they were still doing that sort of thing. And in terms of my service, we have people who go into the real world with people, not the real world, the offline world with people, and are physically present with them because that's necessary. And actually, during the pandemic as well, my service provided physical support to people who were getting online therapy. And there was that interesting mix going on. It wasn't so much of that. I was thinking more about the whole metaphor of therapy is often based upon the offline world. I mean, the holding and handling, those types of words. The notion of holding comes from a physical action, which we then turn into a metaphor in our language with our clients. And we talk about holding, but we're never actually physically holding them. And so I guess it's more about that. Has the metaphors changed, or are they still the same? Do they make the same sense? Is there a new language emerging in your experience in terms of how people work online and the types of terminologies? You use up-regulate and down-regulate, and so has those types of things shifted at all in terms of you as a trainer and you as a therapist, and developing a new language, developing a new experience of this world that's sort of specific to the online experience, and how that might feed into the offline experience? Does that make the question clearer, John?
I hope so. Sorry, I was wandering down the wrong roads.
No. I mean, there are, because we do a lot of body psychotherapy work.
We do.
So I totally get what you heard. And there are people who do manipulation of bodies and fascia therapy and et cetera, and those things. You know, you're not going to be able to manipulate people's fascia sort of via Zoom. That's not happening. Yeah. So people need to physically put hands on in some types of kinetic-based body therapies. So it wasn't really that so much as But we take, I think, as a profession, some of the concepts that come from the capacity to comfort somebody's, because we hold them physically, because we comfort people. But as therapists, you might say, well, I provide a holding space. I mean, we don't mean by that we physically touch people. We mean by that an emotional containment, a support that gives people a sense of security. Touch in therapy is another subject that we just don't have time to talk about, but practitioners have different ideas about it. It's not really opening that can of worms, but just thinking about this virtual experience, and particularly as therapists, and in terms of your experience as a therapist, but as a trainer, is there a new metaphor, language, series of experiences emerging that you could say, well, are sort of really unique to that virtual experience and are enriching and growing the sort of therapeutic modality, if you like?
Yeah, I think I get what you're saying. And I don't think I'm seeing a massive shift in the language. And I think as you're saying those things, I was wondering why. I mean, whether this is relevant or not, but I think one of the things that was easy to miss by colleagues who weren't working online before the pandemic is that both the client and the therapist are embodied in the experience.
Yeah.
So we're not leaving our body to go into Zoom. I'm still in my body here. You are where you are. No, you're physically in your body, and so much of the language is around that still. And I think, this is a little bit philosophical, but for me, the consciousness lives in the dark space that's mediated by the body. So it's, there's so much sensory information flowing in and out through the body into the self, whatever that is, or our experience of the self, whatever that is. And I think my experience of working online is that the computer is some way, or the device is in some way an extension of the body, really. So it doesn't make, in some ways, it doesn't make such a huge difference. And then if you extend that into an energetic kind of field, humans have been praying to what has been believed to be another consciousness, to a god or to multiple gods, and feeling some kind of connection in that too. And that's non-local presence, which is a colleague, very experienced colleague in Canada. So he talks about that non-local presence and how powerful that can be, or we can read novels and feel really connected to characters that were written about hundreds of years ago and longer. It feels like that capacity to be connected in our bodies is still, it's very much alive in this moment as we come together again and have a conversation.
So if I hear you, I think that for me, what I'm hearing you saying is something about the medium is available to us because of these capacities we have around creativity and play and relationship. And it's just another medium in which that happens. And we've had other mediums in which that have happened, which happen to have metaphors around the around the corporal world. So it's happened in what you might call the physically present world. But actually, I think you're pointing to something very interesting, which is around the whole literature wouldn't exist without our capacity to be creative and imaginative.
Absolutely. And I think there's another level to that too, where we have this, because our sound and, when I speak, it only goes so far. If you were standing outside of the flat that I'm in, you probably wouldn't be hearing me, never mind all the way to London. My body generates some kind of smell or odor that also doesn't travel that far. And we also have a sense that the electromagnetism, or that kind of electricity that our body gives off, also doesn't travel that far. But we don't really know about that stuff yet. How far does that energetic connection, how far can it travel? And I think that's also an interesting question for us as therapists. I've worked with people all over the world and had that very energetic connection. And I've wondered about that. Is there a connection? Okay, I can see you on the video here, but is some of what I can feel from you coming over that long distance, I guess? And we have other technologies that can travel very long distances, but we kind of assume our body doesn't have that capacity. But
although, I'm trying to remember the reference, and if I can remember it, I'll send it to you. There has been some research which has shown that you can do things like this, which is very interesting stuff that we can't really explain yet. But it was particularly some experiments were done looking at this issue of how connected are humans as a species on this, for want of a better word, energetic level. I say for want of a better word because I'm uncomfortable with that word, because it doesn't feel sciencey enough for me, I guess. It seems a bit more spiritual and religious, and I get a bit angsty about that stuff. But let's go with it. That's my own prejudice showing up. But there was research which looked at how, and I can't remember all of it properly, but it's going to sound very witchy-woo, but it was quite grounded research where they trained a group of people in Britain around something in a specific way, and it had an impact on a group of people in Australia in a specific way who had no electronic means of communication. It was a controlled thing, and it was just looking at this. And I can't remember the details of it. I remember sort of watching it once some time ago and not really picking up on it. And I'll do some research and find it and see if I can send it to you. So there is, some research there, and probably an emergent body of research there, looking at this idea that humans have this connection beyond as you lovely put it, beyond the ability to just sniff each other out.
Exactly.
There's an energetic level beyond how far one's body odor travels.
I'm glad you can't smell me all the way to London. But it's those ideas that are...
I said, well, a body odor over there is a different thing altogether.
Well, there's all those ideas around quantum physics. Well, not ideas, but like when particles become entangled, one moves and so does the other, and they're completely opposite ends of the universe. And that's not a very scientific description at all, but it's that alluding to those kind of ideas that you're also describing in that study.
And things like that exist. I guess what I'm interested in at the moment in this conversation is understanding that the technology that we're using is facilitating a human capacity, which is to create a relationship. And we have that capacity in us, and we've, in many ways, it's been thinking about it's a binary explanation of human communities, but there was a big split in the 16th century in human consciousness because of the evolution of literacy, for example. That changed human consciousness quite significantly. You can, on one level, say there are literate and oral cultures. And roughly you could say that they still exist on the planet. And psychologically speaking, people from an oral culture are very different to people from a literate culture. And it's almost like, I guess what I'm hearing you say, something along the lines of this move into the online world is a natural extension of that capacity to be literate. Because literate psychology, the capacity to be literate, allows us to magically transform objects. So objects don't have to be things anymore. We could, that can become in my mind an aeroplane or a pterodactyl or a nuclear bomb or whatever I want it to be. And that's a sort of literate thing That's part of this literal development. It's not concrete, and so it's almost like I'm hearing you say that this online space is the next natural extension of that literate capacity to be creative. Is that right?
Am I saying that? I'm not disagreeing with that. I think that's a very interesting point. I think what I notice is it's the capacity to make relationship, even when there aren't people local to us that we can make helpful relationships with. And I think that's the real revolution for us humans, socially, therapeutically, and
right.
And I think what you're introducing me to some new ideas, Noel. So but I think that's the bit we're excited about online events, and also as therapists, that we can just access. It's a bit like living in a village, and our tribe doesn't exist in that village. We can then reach out into the rest of the world and find people who resonate with us.
Yeah. I had an interesting experience the other week, and this might resonate with you as well, as both as a clinician and as a trainer. I met a patient who literally I'd not seen, except in this world that you and I are in right now. And I'd literally never seen their legs. And we met, and I said, "Oh, you've got legs." And I'd seen this torso and head, and I had actually seen their legs, but not in the way I was suggesting, sort of with the person moving and stuff like that. And that was an interesting first for me. There are some patients I've got which I never expect to see, to be honest, because I work internationally. There's some people I don't think I'm ever going to actually physically see them, and that's okay. But I had this, and this was the pandemic thing, was I'd taken on some patients who I took them on via the screen, and that was new, really. And then meeting them in the real world. And to be honest, my experience is this, that nothing much changed meeting them in the real world. I felt like I had met them anyway.
Yes.
Very genuinely, I felt like I had met them. And that became a natural expansion of this relationship. And this relationship was more than good enough, to be honest.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think some of the interesting developments that are still a long way away from the mainstream therapeutic culture is working in virtual reality. So I had a practice in Second Life, 2009-10, which was working with avatars. Sandra and I, my business partner on Onlinevents, we got some Oculus around Christmas, so we've been spending a bit of time in VR.
Getting one, yeah.
This is really great. Yeah. And the real...
I'm not sure what's happening, whether it's at my end, James, or at John's end. Has he frozen? James, are you there?
It's on John's end.
Okay. I don't know if John can hear us. Anyway, sort of one of the things about the virtual world is that it can suddenly stop like this, and John's frozen. I'll message him as we're talking, see if he's going to come back in another way. So John, you have frozen. Here we go. John.
He should be able to join in just by re-clicking the invite.
He should know that. He'll come back in, I should imagine. Anyway, I'll just cover up. John was beginning to talk about sort of virtual reality and use of online spaces in terms of exploring virtual reality. Router rebooting, I've just got a message from him, so he'll join us when his router comes in. And we'll still look at that. I mean, I am going to say that I did some of this virtual stuff ages ago, actually, and I'm sort of going to bring it into the conversation with John around working with people with severe learning disabilities, and here he is. And
I know.
space, that's all right. It's fine. It's just part of this experience, isn't it? So you were just getting into looking at virtual reality. I'm just aware of time. What I want to do is maybe continue this more broader philosophical conversation, then come back to what you're actually doing and the services that people can get from you, and spend the last 10 minutes talking about that. If that's all right, John.
That'd be great.
Okay. People can just sort of know how to get hold of you, what training's available, and all that sort of stuff. And I hope Saz is okay. Give her my love. I haven't seen her in ages, actually.
I will. Yeah.
Do. You've just met the move into playing with virtual reality, and I remember I got involved in virtual reality ages ago when working with people with profound learning disabilities who were pre-verbal, and we were trying to play about with this idea of how do you create meaningful records for people that don't have language and can't read and write, and yet their whole lives were written in filing cabinets that they were never going to be able to get access to. So we created these electronic, if you like, filing cabinets full of their experiences, which were online virtual worlds, which staff were trained in how to navigate, and the patients could use that space, which was interesting. And they could use that space in a way that was not available to them in other types of spaces because of the cognitive problems they had, the intellectual problems they had, and the physical problems that they had. So it was making me think of that. What are you thinking of doing in terms of virtual reality? Where does it seem to be going, or are you at the very early days of it, if you like?
Definitely at the early days, and yeah, and I think that's going to be huge. Companies like Facebook are investing billions into the hardware, the software, the ideas around the metaverse. It's just we're all going to be living in Player One worlds. The movie. Perhaps at some point. Anyway, that's a whole other road. But I think the bit that was very powerful when I was working in Second Life, that I think could really make a difference in therapy in the mainstream too, is the capacity to represent ourselves in the virtual world as we experience ourselves internally. And I think this is often not talked about very much in the therapeutic world, that the actual physical body of the client, as helpful as it can be, can also be a distraction from really being able to know the experience of the client and to be fully kind of absorbed and immersed in the experience of the client, and for the client to be able to shape an avatar, which is the digital body that someone would inhabit in the virtual reality. Sorry, I know you know that, Noel, but just for colleagues who may be like, what is John and Noel talking about right now? But I think that can be very, very powerful. And we're talking lots about body dysmorphia. We're talking about gender and sexuality.
Yeah, exactly. That's right. Yeah. It could be revolutionary, I think, to be honest. It's also, I'm intrigued as well, because it's also, we know that the online gaming world, etc., all these things are having some powerful physical consequences. So, for example, gaming produces white brain matter growth, which is extraordinary. And for people who don't know why that's extraordinary, white brain matter destruction is what dementia is. And so if you're finding activities that grow white brain matter, that's extraordinary. It could be the answer to dementia. We don't know. It could literally be the capacity to regrow the brain. And it's extraordinary stuff. I mean, that is absolutely extraordinary stuff that's going on. So there are some really powerful, interesting issues there that you're bringing up. I mean, it's at the end of our time, so we can't really talk about it. And it's also, it's really, the research isn't clear yet, but there is a capacity, for example, I think, in terms of looking at therapeutic applications of online and virtual worlds, which bypass whole traumatic brain functioning and can heal it sort of almost instantaneously. And so, for example, things like the Veterans Administration are producing games that deal with chronic pain and don't use opiates, and so you don't develop addiction to opiates. And you know, you can imagine somebody, if they're in chronic pain through having sort of severe burns, etc., then if that gaming is helping medically for them, then there's going to naturally, I think, be an extension into creating more of an online experience, a gaming experience in the everyday life of that person, because it's of such benefit to them. And I think that, you know, there's interesting potential there to look at those things, particularly, you know, thinking about body dysmorphia and eating disorders and transgender issues and deliberate self-harm and some of these really, really difficult things that we struggle with as therapists to help people engage in relationships. I think there is a possibility here, isn't there, of extending the relational repertoire.
Well, absolutely. And empathy is just such an important curative factor. I mean, there's lots of debate. Is it the curative factor? But it's just so important to feel like another human being really gets our experience and really knows who we are, and to be able to represent ourselves in a way that feels accurate to us and have the experience of someone else, maybe a therapist, maybe another person in our life, really getting us. It's just so powerful and so helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I can see that. We are sort of out of time for that more philosophical conversation, which you and I tend to get into when we meet up with. I hope it was interesting to
we do.
You.
Well, I've enjoyed it, Noel, which yes. Let's hope other people have too. It's not just about you and I.
I'm really interested in this stuff, like I say, because I watch my boy do this really natural, interesting stuff, and I find him totally inspirational around this. He's doing what I'm talking about, and he's way ahead of me. It's like when he's skiing. I watch him skiing. I'm quite jealous of his skiing, and he's like a ballet dancer skiing. He can ski backwards on one leg, and it's just natural to him. And he's doing that while he's looking at me and telling me how good I am at skiing, and I'm going, "Oh, am I really?" And I feel a bit like that around these issues with him. That I'm clunkily trying to understand them, and he's actually just being them and doing them, and sort of, and it fascinates me. I'm sort of, you know, I'm really interested in his experience of this and the experience of his friends, because I think they're telling us something really important about the future, and how much fun it can be as well. You know, because as my cronky old body falls apart, which it is, I sort of, the online world beckons, mate. That's sort of like, I'm going to be having a very, very healthy avatar, I can tell you. Just let's vector back into practical reality, which is, what is it that you're actually offering at the moment in terms of the types of courses that are available to people? How many courses are there? How will they get hold of them? How much do they cost? What do they get for the money? All of that sort of stuff. So start to sort of open up the shop, as it were, that you've got.
Yeah, what can we say? Well, Sandra and I have delivered, we think it's probably, if it's not the biggest, it's one of the biggest libraries of learning libraries for videos for therapeutic practitioners outside of YouTube. So they all come with CPD certificates. We've got some great recordings of you in there, Neil, like both in conference, full conference mode.
But that's very kind of you, John. Like, there are some things of me. Let's just leave it at that.
No, they're excellent. Some of the stuff that we've done together still influencing my practice, Noel. So I was thinking about that before our conversation. So I would definitely encourage people to check out those conversations that we've had. They're really excellent. You'll probably hear a French siren in the background. Hopefully they're not coming for me. What would we say? I mean, we've got live events going on every day, usually 2, 3, maybe 4 events. We've got large conferences.
A day?
We've got We'll do 3 or 4 events a day, every day.
I thought
we
you
have
slow down.
Yes.
The last conversation we had, you were like, "No, I'm going to slow down. I'm doing too much work." And now you just say you got 3 or 4 events a day. What is wrong with you?
Yes. Well, I mean, at the moment, I have the privilege right now in this moment of being the voice of online events, but I'm kind of the team has really grown in terms of the infrastructure and the colleagues who are running events. We have got a really big fundraising event coming up on, I mean, if someone's watching this in a year or so, it won't make any difference, but on the 26th of March, we're going to do a big fundraising event in terms of what's going on in Ukraine. So that could be interesting, where lots of colleagues are going to come in who are experts in trauma and body regulation, and also existential thinking, like how do we live in a world that's so frightening right now. So that, if anybody's watching kind of over the next few days, definitely something to look out for.
Just for James's benefit, is there a link that he can put out now on the show for that event on the 26th of March?
I don't have it in front of me right now, but we can get that over to you tomorrow morning for sure. Yes.
Is it on the website now, online events or something?
Yes, absolutely. It's there. Go through the Eventbrite page. It's really important because it's going to be all the profits are going to go to a UN charity that always will then distribute it for people who are suffering in the Ukraine.
Does it have a title yet or anything? Can you remember it?
We're calling it an emergency summit. What can counselling and psychotherapy do to contribute to world peace, social justice and well-being? So,
James, have you made a note of all of that and you post it out? That's sort of Jason. You woke me up to do this.
Yeah, so that's just emerging for us over the last 24 hours. We think that's going to be, well, both really important in terms of a learning experience, in terms of CPD. It's going to be important in terms of coming together as a community of practitioners, because we're also, I think lots of us are frightened about what's going on, and we're working with people who are frightened. And of course, we might be working with people in the region as well and need support too. And of course, those finances are important too. So if anybody wants to come along and donate, and that too, all the profits from that event will go over to.
And also, there's an exciting possibility there in terms of therapeutically, because the technology actually allows us to be there and work with people there on the ground in a way that in the past it wasn't possible. We would have to wait till it was sorted out enough and safe enough to physically be present, but we can actually intervene sooner, which is always a good idea when it comes to managing trauma and overwhelming events. The sooner we can get to people, the better. So sort of a real boost, I think, in terms of our understanding of this stuff. So that's great. What else is going on at the moment for you that people can access?
We're doing some great stuff around neuroscience and polyvagal theory, so that to help practitioners work with the client's psychology, but also their body, and even knowing simple things like if you choose a therapy room next to a lift, the low frequency of a lift will be triggering for someone who's got early developmental trauma. So like things that just, you don't know if you don't know them, I guess. And also how the neurophysiology is impacting the client and the therapist in the room. We're also going to transport that in a collaboration with Temenos. We're going to do some residential training around that too. So everybody gets the theoretical training in online events and online spaces, and then can also have a residential experience of practicing that work. So we're kind of interested in the fusion between those two training kind of experiences as well.
Yeah. I mean, it's fascinating stuff. So people can access all this information through the Online Events website, I guess?
Absolutely. By and large, most of our events are a pay what you can access. Right. So we ask people to be kind of fair and honest about that. But that also means lots of students come in, all their money's getting spent on their courses, their books, their travel. They can still come and join us. Lots of those workshops are recorded and then go into our library, which is $9.99 a month. So that is also, price of a couple of cups of coffee at your favorite coffee outlet.
Yeah, it's a really good deal. So it's onlinevents.co.uk still.
Absolutely, yes.
And so people can go to there. James will make sure that link goes out. And are there any sort of public facing as opposed to professional facing things that might be interesting for people who so is there anything there that you're doing in terms of sort of more general interest, or is it at the moment aimed more at professionals who are qualifying and or are qualified?
We've got some really big conferences planned for this year. In July we're going to do a conference that's based on a book that was released last year called Black Identities and White Therapies. So that's going to have a lot of stuff for therapists, but also I think that will be interesting to people who are interested in well-being and also interested in how to access therapies and like opening up access to therapy. Right. And then in October, we've got a big conference on neurodivergence. So we're going to be having practitioners who identify as neurodivergent.
Wonderful.
Talking about being a therapist who's neurodivergent, working with clients who are. We'll have educators, we'll have parents. And in November, we've got a big conference also on bereavement. So we're
wonderful.
So yeah, lots of stuff for the public too. Yeah.
Brilliant. I mean, it's for somebody who is thinking about calming down and not doing so much work, you're failing miserably, John.
Yes, it is one of my consistent failures. That's for sure. No. Yeah.
So congratulations on being a total failure. There you go.
Thank you, Noel. Thank you. And I want to kind of give a shout out to, Sandra, my sister, my business partner, and of course, everyone in the Online Events team that makes it possible to serve so many colleagues.
They're awesome. I think I've met all of your sisters now, all but one.
Yes.
They are. Yeah. It's quite a clan you have there. So I wouldn't mess with the Wilson clan if I was you. They are a sort of hard Scottish, sort of West Coast Scottish clan that you don't want to mess with if I was you. So
a formidable force for sure.
Definitely. Anyway, give my love to Saz and to your other sisters and to your family. It's a real pleasure to catch up with you again. I hope you've had an interesting evening, folks. We're going to have to finish there. John's going to stay there unless he has to reboot something again, but otherwise he'll just stay with us. Really lovely to have everybody with us this evening. And do go and check out Online Events. It's a sort of extraordinary thing that started with a camcorder, sort of however long ago that started, and now I think has come to the position it sort of deserved, having been a bit of an outlier. The world has caught up with what you're offering, which is great to see. So I'm very happy for you all. We're going to end there, and I'll see everybody next week for the show. I'm not quite sure who's on. I never do know who's on from week to week, but there you go. And I'm going to say goodbye for now, and see you next week.